the overarching goal is truly to make the entire rental process from the day it needs to be listed until, the day that lease ends, easier for everybody involved.
So the question is this: how do most agents who don't have access to the secrets the top agents in our industry hoard themselves grow and prosper in today's real estate market? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. Hi, I'm Aaron Muchastegui, and welcome to Real Estate Rockstars. Real Estate Rockstars, this is Aaron Muchastegui. I'm here for a really fun interview today. This is going to be a unique interview. So I get to interview today Ryan Barone. He is the founder, the first developer, the creator, the CTO of RentRedi. So you guys have recently heard me saying RentRedi is our new sponsor, and they've been our sponsor for all of our Real Estate Rockstar shows. We aren't running any ads right now other than telling people about the RentRedi property management software. And I wanted to be able to talk to Ryan today to learn a little bit more about it. And so I think there's going to be so much that we're going to be able to teach people today about, renting houses, the processes behind it, and, kind of how people manage in today's kind of COVID world, how to communicate, how to learn a lot about your customer and your clients and even your team members in any company you might be involved in. So Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. So Ryan, first as we get started, tell everybody, so where do you live right now?
I live in New York City.
So in New York City, New York City has been all over our podcast over the past, few months. We've had a lot of stuff happening out there. My daughter was super disappointed. We were supposed to go see Beetlejuice on her birthday in May. And that obviously all got canceled. And now maybe she'll never get to go see Beetlejuice. But New York is one of the most heavily impacted places for kind of what's going on. And so they've talked a lot about, the market going up and down there, and people leaving the city and going to the outskirts. But now maybe people are starting to come back. They talk about vacancies way up. What's it like in the city right now?
It's pretty interesting. They've certainly done, I think, a pretty good job of, moving everything outdoors as much as possible. People wearing masks and all of that's been great. But it's been really interesting to see how landlords have adapted to managing during this post-COVID time as well.
Yeah, like what are you going to do for the outdoor restaurant? Like New York is cold in the winter. Like right now, it's probably super cold out there. So like, are people eating outside in giant coats or no?
It's been fairly warm so far. I'm just as curious as you to see how it goes. If people will throw up like heating lamps and just throw on coats and say, I'm going to do that all winter, or they'll eventually, throw their hands up and go indoors. I'm hoping for the outdoor. Yeah.
Some cities have even closed off their streets completely. Like certain, and then brought everything out to cover the whole street. And I ate at a place when I was out in California a couple weeks ago that they redesigned their whole outside area back in March to where you feel like you're inside, except for they have these open windows with heaters over them instead, so they could find their exception. So do you think? So when it comes to, are you seeing a lot of rental vacancies? Are you seeing as many vacancies in New York City as people are talking about in housing right now?
I don't know if it's as much as is played out. There's definitely certainly a lot of challenges, but I think it's a lot of quite a bit of a mix of things. I've seen some landlords are vacancies not an issue, and they're juggling with how do I shift things to not as much pen and paper, and some are juggling just plain out vacancies in that respect.
Yeah. And just from a personal level, do you think that a year from now, New York will be super busy again in full? Do you think that it'll go back to the way that it was?
I do. I'm optimistic on New York. I think honestly, the feel of it's certainly different in terms of the precautions you have to take. But in terms of the feel in New York, it still feels like New York. So I feel pretty good that it'll come back.
Yeah. So you think people should, because there's opportunity for people to invest there now, right? So prices have come down a little bit, and with vacancies becomes, cheaper rents and things like that. So for the people that have been priced out, maybe now's the time to get back in before it gets back to awesome, right?
Definitely. One of the landlords I know in the city has a portfolio out in Crown Heights, and pretty much got all of that, built that up throughout the financial crisis when, everything was really low out, especially out in the Crown Heights area. And has been able to do really well by kind of riding the market the right way.
Yeah. So what have you done yourself through, this year after, like, post COVID, right? So the world changes. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Do you have any habits or things that you've done to make sure that you keep pushing, moving the ball forward, keep living your best life?
Just like personal things to,
yeah, because outside, like, so much of New York was the fun stuff in the city, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can still get a lot of food here, and I do love trying new food, different foods. So I'm still keeping strong, eating Taco Tuesday every week.
Yeah,
trying out new foods in different areas. So you can still do that, which is a great time. You're either outdoors or ordering it in, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, so enjoy what you can of the city. It's about the glass half full always when we're staying grateful. One of the last guests that I had on here, we talked about his big survival technique was just staying grateful. Yeah. When you're grateful for the things that you do have, it's a lot tougher to think about the stuff that we don't. Right. So let's talk some more real estate. Let's talk real estate and landlords. When you grew up, you weren't thinking, hey, I need to build a software for landlords, right? So I think the story behind it is this kind of happened by accident. It happened out of need because you were like the ideal user for RentRedi. Tell me about how that started. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, interestingly, I mean, it started more actually on just purely the application side of things. RentRedi itself really goes end to end, but it started out with just applications. And like you said, it was from my personal experience. So I was a renter in New York City. I'd found an apartment on a listing site and went and looked at it and realized I needed all of these documents for my application and all this information. And I kept having to redo that for different landlords and different agents. And it was really interesting to me that it seemed like there must have been a better way than these agents needing to continue to follow up with different people to get the same information or wait for that same information, likewise for the landlord. So initially it was just an application app for myself and friends to put together the things we needed to be prepared to go to these units. And quickly landlords and agents came back to us and said, wait a minute, our side is mostly pen and paper and spreadsheets as well. Can you make it better on our side too? And so that's where we started building more to add in the tenant screening and automate that, to put in pre-qualifications so that agents could meet with their the best 5 people instead of necessarily the first 5 people that reached out to them, and then from there expanded into paying rent and maintenance and all of these different pain points that we got, really stories from landlords and their teams that we got along the way to really build out everything that it's become.
So you were applying for an apartment and they said, hey, we need your pay stubs. We need where you lived before. And they need like this whole thing.
Letter of employment, bank statements, tax returns. I was a student at the time, so student transcripts. So
wow. So you get all that together. And then if you don't get the first one, then the next week they ask you for a similar, maybe slightly different version. And so then you're picking that apart and you start to think there must be an easier way to like save all these in one spot. So we can just send them over or whatever.
Right. And even when you look at colleges, they've created the Common App for colleges where you fill out one application and you can apply to all of these different colleges across the country. So it made a lot of sense even coming from that setting to say, why isn't there kind of like a college Common App for apartments for renting?
What a great point. Like that all by like that in a nutshell right there is like being able to fill out an application in one place and then being able to apply at a bunch of places. Right now, the real estate market is really tight, for rentals. For all of our rentals, we're getting multiple applications at the same time. We are not getting to approve everyone. And it is a frustrating process, I think, for people when they're applying. So I think that's a great point to say, hey, what about that easy button where they get to do it once, they get to say, hey, these are the 7 or 8 places I want. It's cool that your software started with a lot of that in mind. And then along the way, you started adjusting that. We talked before we got on that one of the best ways you find stuff is like you're very active inside your business. So you go in and you read the chats, you read what your customers are telling you. And then a few weeks later, you start developing it. And who knows, maybe a few weeks after that, you actually have some of those new things in place. Are there any things that came up in that you were super surprised by? Like something that a customer told you, like, hey, could you do it like this instead? And you had to make a big pivot or a new process change.
Yeah, definitely. So one was one was from a landlord we had in Texas. They reached out on a Friday night. They said to us, "Listen, I have this tenant. I'm unfortunately going through an eviction proceeding. One of the issues in place. This was maybe a year so ago. They said I'm going through an eviction proceeding. One of the things in Texas, which is actually becoming more prominent throughout a lot of different states, is if you accept a partial payment from that tenant." It resets the clock. And so if you were to go into court the next day, the judge would just throw out the case. And so the landlord said, can you allow me to decide by tenant if I allow partial payments or no payments at all? And so we went in, we developed that overnight. We added that into the software for them so they could go in and control that on a tenant by tenant basis so that they'd be covered, in any of those situations that they happen to find themselves in.
Dude, what an awesome example. Because yes, if tenants can come hand you a $50 check and postpone things, but you can actually say, I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to deposit that check. I'm not going to accept a partial payment. But when everything is moved to online, I could see that being a loophole. That was a very, like an important need on there. Now you guys, if a tenant has a problem with a house now, so a resident, so they say, hey, the dishwasher's broken. Did that all happen through RentRedi too?
It does. And one of the nice things for the tenant is they have a mobile app directly on their phone. And so they can take advantage of a lot of features that comes with just having a smartphone, which is, if they say, the dishwasher's leaking, instead of just leaving it at that, they can actually take a video of the issue and send it in with it. And so it's very easy for a landlord or for their team, or even now with the partnership we have, especially for, newer landlords, they're just starting out and maybe they don't have a maintenance person that can help them. They can enable that and actually have somebody see the video, diagnose the issue, communicate with the tenant, fix it, mark it complete. And the landlord gets all of the oversight without necessarily having to go fix that, leaking dishwasher themselves.
Hi, Real Estate Rockstars. This is Aaron Amuchastegui, and I am so excited to share with you our newest head podcast sponsor. And this is a company called RentRedi. RentRedi is a landlord-tenant software that has everything you need to manage your rentals from your phone or your computer. No need to be tech savvy, download multiple programs, or hire a specialist. RentRedi is easy to use for everyone. And if you do have a question, their customer support team is available to make sure managing your properties doesn't have to be harder than it already is. RentRedi has a feature for every step of the landlord process. You can list your vacancy for free to Realtor.com and doorsteps, find quality tenants with a full tenant screening process, send and e-sign leases right from the app, and track maintenance requests. Yes, there really is one app for all of that. Best of all, not only is RentRedi easy to use with awesome customer service, but it's affordable as well. Get a subscription of RentRedi for as little as $1 a year when you sign up for their annual plan using code ROCKSTAR. Right? Now that's crazy. $1 a year. Why wouldn't you go sign up just to see, even if you've got one tenant or want to try it with one of them? So that's right. You get a whole year of RentRedi for just $1 when you sign up at rentredi.com. It's spelled RentRedi.com using code ROCKSTAR. Yeah. So everything has changed this year, right? Mm-hmm. Like landlords' needs are changing, the things that they're doing, just like you said, people are like excited about it. One of the things you said, told to me before we got on the line was it used to be that landlords kind of had a choice,
right?
Like if they needed software or not, if they needed to accept electronic payments or not. Some preferred, check or cash or being able to go to places. How has that changed this year for people?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely said it. I mean, in the past, you could get a check in the mail and that might not have been an issue. Right now, it's a safety issue for a lot of landlords that they're saying, okay, well, I still need to get my rent somehow, but I don't necessarily want to take a check that someone, just had their hands on, wrote, and put in the mail to send to me. So giving them a way to have a contactless payments platform to collect that information, or even going back to the maintenance piece that we were talking about there, maybe they have that broken dishwasher and they say, okay, well, or maybe if it's not as complicated as a dishwasher, maybe if it's just something wrong with the sink or something, they can order a part and send that to somebody and say, you know what, I'll deduct it from your rent. Here's the part you need to fix it. And we don't have to have someone come into your unit. And so we've actually seen some landlords start to repurpose some existing features in that way to really fit what they need to still do everything they need to in terms of managing, but also handle the, the safety needs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, so much of 2020 has been like the big pivot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like where so many times we have to find new ways of doing things. For our rentals, we used to always have somebody there at move-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would hand them the keys, they'd fill out a form with them, they would do a walkthrough, anything not here, they would show them how the house is working. Right. And then anytime there was anything that needed to be done, we'd get to go in and out. And all that changed. And all that changed overnight. And we instantly had to say, like, okay, so now we're no longer meeting with the residents there. We're going to print out the paper a few days ahead of time and leave them. Now we're doing like Zoom meetings where we're doing video calls before they move in to meet them, video calls the day after they move in to walk through the house to make sure it's okay. And then a month before they move out, we used to go in and say, hey, you move out next month. Let's walk through the house, tell you how you're going to get your deposit back. And now that's getting switched over to Zoom. And it's all these, and it does seem like every couple of weeks still, right? These changes happened in March, but every couple of weeks we are still repurposing how we do real estate, how we manage these new problems, because something else will come up and we'll go like, oh, yeah, we used to do that to prevent this issue. But now we stopped doing that, in March and April. Maybe we can do this now instead. So you'll probably continue to see so many changes. Any future changes that you're thinking are going to be coming soon, or that people are going to be asking for out in real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the big ones was the maintenance coordination piece. Was one we actually just added a week ago. It was a big ask from a lot of landlords on the platform. Saying, if I don't have somebody, or I haven't necessarily negotiated with trying to get the right person to fix things, can you help me with that? So that was really the purpose for adding that. And likewise, anything we add at this point actually comes, you were talking about the chat earlier, it really comes from these landlords messaging in and saying, here's the issue I'm having. What do you think about this? So a little sneak peek of one of them that's coming up soon is we've had some landlords asking about, can you report my rent to credit bureaus, or my tenants' rent to credit bureaus, as a way to either help them boost credit or encourage them to pay on time. And so we did actually come up with a partnership with TransUnion, and we'll actually be working on and releasing that later this year, where tenants will be able to have their rent reported to the credit bureau and boost their credit, or pay more frequently on time for landlords, which will be nice for them.
Yeah, that is very cool. That's a current problem that we have with our residents at different times. Like sometimes when someone does have to go through eviction, you get a judgment, but it doesn't necessarily go anywhere. And when someone goes to apply for rent at the next place, there's no way to really notify that landlord other than the tenant's honesty in their application, right? This is like, have you been evicted? And they could say no, and it's not going to be very easy to see if they're telling the truth or not. So the credit bureau stuff, I think, is pretty great. So, agents, as you're listening, this year I've been talking so much about kind of having a backup plan, about expanding from being, I don't want to say just an agent, because agents, you guys are rock star agents. So nobody is just an agent, right? You guys are doing a ton of volume and you're really working hard to be successful. But I like the idea of diversifying, of having some other things to help you out. Because maybe the first couple months of COVID, there wasn't as many transactions. Like now, a lot of agents have seen like, no, it's my busiest year. But there was some time where there was that shift where I'm sure a lot of agents that are greatly successful now were thinking, wow, I wish I had a couple other things. So we've talked to people about, getting into investing, about buying a rental, paying off a rental, or we talked about buying other businesses and things like that. And so so this sort of thing, you're talking about a software that can help people when things come in. Maybe it's even going to outsource it. Most of your things you come up with are, errors that landlords make. What are some common mistakes that landlords make when they first become landlords?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it in lots of different pieces of the process, and it can be something like, not calculating late fees correctly, or even in certain states now, there's maximum late fees you have. So if you have, some base rate after 5 days, you charge $20 and you're charging $10 every day. In certain states, there might be a 5% or 10% max late fee you can charge that you need to watch out for and make sure you're capping that in your leases or when you're charging it to tenants. The same is true with the application process as well. When you talk about really having a process in terms of what do you look for, what do you accept based on, what do you reject based on, having that in place so that you make sure you're protecting yourselves as well from a fair housing standpoint, and just making sure you're following a process. And then you even see it in the application process, or in the maintenance rather, where if someone reaches out for an issue and you don't necessarily, as a agent, now landlord, don't necessarily see the issue, and they're reaching directly out, maybe over text, to somebody that would come fix it, and it doesn't get fixed. Ultimately, that does fall back on you, but you might not have the oversight to step in and say, oh, wait, I can help out if I see this sitting here. So having a way to really see, what's going on within your units in terms of what's pending or what's done, even if you're not necessarily the one that's going to go, fix it yourself by hand.
Yeah. I could see not knowing your state's laws. It says it also seems, because buying a house and renting it out, it is very simple. Mm-hmm. It seems very simple. I also remember when I had I probably had at least 10 houses, really maybe a lot more, when I first had a resident tell me, hey, aren't you supposed to have an extra, deadbolt here? It was a privacy deadbolt. And I was like, well, no. And then I re-looked at the Texas law, and it said, no, they did need a special deadbolt above the other ones, that there was not a key, so they could be secure. And I was like, really? That's a law? That's if you're going to have a renter, you have to add a special deadbolt inside the house. And there's been a slew of things that I have learned that were very simple, laws, that you figure out. Or when somebody's moving in, you go, oh, we'll just charge an extra deposit for this or for that, but making sure you're within those guidelines. So I would say that makes a lot of sense, that those would be common mistakes that landlords would make. We always it was interesting to learn pricing mistakes too when we first started. Mm-hmm. So when we would list a house, and sometimes no one would show up. And our rule of thumb was, if we had it listed and nobody showed up, there were two things that were wrong. Either it was bad pictures or bad pricing, right? So then it could be both of those things that are stopping people from showing up. So then as we would fix it, but then if a lot of people were showing up and nobody wanted to rent it, then we usually knew that was actually if they don't show up, it's a pricing issue. If the pictures are great and no one shows up, it's a pricing issue. Your price too high. If people show up and now nobody wants it, that means the actual condition is worse than the pictures. It means there's actually something wrong with the house. So getting to adjust that along the way and going, all right, so no one's showing up, let's adjust our price. People are showing up, they don't like it. Let's go see if we need to fix something and make it a little bit better. Any other kind of landlord, tips that you would give somebody if they're getting ready to buy their first rental? What things that they should be thinking about?
I mean, one of the best ones is to put yourself in. I look at it just because I'm used to looking at it from a software standpoint of trying to take this group of knowledge, all the users on the platform, and try to make the platform itself a guideline to make you get to skip over some of the mistakes that maybe other landlords make. But the same thing is true for Real Estate Rockstars and other resources like that, and talking with other landlords to understand, what did you do when you first started out? What things went wrong? I think you can kind of use podcasts, you can use software platforms as really a great way of skipping over a lot of things that you otherwise probably would have made the same mistakes as the 10 people before you and the 10 people after you if you didn't know.
Yeah. Do you think most real estate rental transactions in New York now, is it all, kind of hands-free, touch-free? People aren't meeting in person anymore? Are people still meeting in person now? And how do you think that might change over the next year?
So I think there's a huge shift. At least before COVID, the majority of landlords were still on pen and paper and spreadsheets. And sometimes it wasn't by choice. In a lot of cases, softwares in the past really have targeted these larger property managers and largely ignored the individual investor that wants to self-manage. But there has been a huge shift, and I think it will continue in the long run. It's not something that I look at it and say, okay, with COVID, it's happening today and it'll switch back afterwards, because there is an enormous amount of convenience, not just for landlords, but also for their tenants in the way that impacts their bottom line with turnover. So from the perspective of, like you said, someone sees your great photos, they come in and see your unit, they're excited about it. And, why is it that 50% of tenants leave at the end of the lease? Something along the way didn't go as great as they would have hoped. And it's not necessarily for lack of care. A lot of landlords have put their heart and soul into this. It's because in a lot of cases, there just aren't the resources there for them. And so that's part of the thing that I love about Real Estate Rockstars. Part of the thing that we're trying to do at RentRedi as well is just try to give them more of these resources to say, you have everything you need to collect rent in an easier way. Your tenants just have auto pay. They don't have to say, oh, I forgot to put a check in the mail. Or there aren't several messages back and forth saying, is it leaking from the faucet? Is it the pipe underneath? Is it destroying the kitchen floor? Can you put a bowl under it? Do I need to get out of bed? All these things that, can drive a landlord up the wall, a tenant up the wall, and ultimately everybody just gets to live a lot happier because of it.
Yeah, the living happy for everyone. So one of the things you mentioned in there was you're focusing on the littler guy, right? Like people getting started because overall you felt like they're somewhat overworked. And I get that point because as I would travel around to trade shows, there was a lot of different cool software and technology out there for real estate. But some of it was like thousands and thousands of dollars. So you're talking about focusing for an individual landlord. But what if that individual landlord has an agent? So most of our listeners are agents. Now, a lot of our agents are becoming investors or have some investments, but others might actually, be buying a house for a client and saying, hey, you should buy this as a rental. If they wanted to use your software to manage for them, is that possible? Can they set it up as like, hey, if I said, hey, I'm an agent, and I want to rent this out for a client of mine, but I want to use your software, does the agent still sign up?
Right. Yeah. And we have agents that do that. And so one of the nice things is, especially coming from the application process was part of, version 1 early on, that was really important to me as well. So agents can either be a teammate of a landlord, or if they wanted to even create the account and just share it with the landlord so that they have access, they can do that as well. And so one of the nice things is you can control that access even by property or unit. So if an agent themselves is managing for a few different landlords and they want to own the main account, they could add all of these different properties and share only access to those properties for those landlords, or vice versa. Those landlords could sign up and add the agent back and give them just access to view or even view and edit the pre-qualifications and applications that come in, so that they have a better idea about, okay, I went and met with this person. Have they actually applied? Does it look good? Should we continue with the next steps of signing their lease?
Yeah. What are your biggest goals with RentRedi?
Really, the biggest one is, the thing that makes me happiest to this day is when someone reaches out and tells me how much it has impacted them or their tenants. So the overarching goal is truly to make the entire rental process from the day it needs to be listed until the day that lease ends easier for everybody involved, for landlords, for agents, for tenants, for even the maintenance people involved, just everybody to have this seamless experience that addresses all of these pain points that a lot of landlords and agents and maintenance people have experienced, and in our case have shared it with us. So we've had a chance to now say, okay, you've told us what's wrong. You've told us the way it should be. Let's just make that and give that to you, and then stop having the issue.
Yeah, that's even cooler. Like I've released a couple books, and every time we said, hey, if it changes one person's life, it's worth it, right? Really? So whenever you get the story that says like, hey, this totally worked, I'm a new landlord and my life's easier, that's awesome. But you also have that extra thing too, where they said, they have a new problem that nobody had solved, and then you get to be the first to solve it because you listen, right? You get to listen to your people, and you're small enough, like you're a startup. Right. You're a startup with a lot of customers, right? But you're growing, you're building onto your stuff, which gives you the flexibility to be able to make some of those changes and keep it fun. I like that when you get to think about like the what actually drives you for it. So one of the things when I was talking to some people over at RentRedi a couple months ago, I talked to them about, but once you get these other software companies they use, once we get up to so many properties, they start charging us more. Right. So they charge us per property that we have. So there's a lot of cool extra services, but depending on how many properties you have, they just keep charging you. But some of the gals that work for you said that is not, you guys aren't doing that. Right. So you're not, as somebody gets bigger, the way they described it to me was, we want to help the person grow. We don't want to hinder the growth. So you have a rate that you charge, but it doesn't go up if they get big, or if the landlord does own 20 houses now.
Right.
Is that how it works? And how'd you come up with that idea?
Yeah, well, I didn't personally, I can't take credit for it. It was actually, we were in the very early stages. There was this owner association in New Jersey that we went to. We went to these meetings. They were a big part of our focus groups in terms of trying to design really everything they needed and nothing they didn't. And one of the things that we constantly heard was, I don't want to be taxed for my growth, was the way that they put it to me. Mm-hmm. So they felt like, I finally, I'm managing well, I'm getting this new unit, and all of a sudden, just like you said, okay, getting this new one pushes me over some threshold where all of a sudden I'm, losing all of these profits that I've worked hard to attain. And so we really thought of it as saying, okay, is there a way that we can make this incredibly affordable for landlords and not charge them more as they add additional units? And that's still true and will stay true in terms of they can add as many units as they want. They can add unlimited units, unlimited tenants. We don't charge them anymore. If like with most of them just use the annual plan and they pay $9 a month. So, a pizza once a month to manage all of their units. And whether they grow to 50 or 500, they don't end up paying more. And it's the way that we've structured it in terms of partnerships that we've made really on behalf of them as well, to say, can we partner with TransUnion and say, we'll bring you more landlords that wouldn't have run screenings through you before, but do need to run these, allow us to bring them to you and discount them in the process and treat them as this one, group together. And we're able to make money in that respect without charging more to the landlord.
Yeah. So at that first, you talked about a focus group, like a landlord group that you got to go to. And, a lot of agents, you guys have local meetups that you go to, for agents, but they also have landlord groups out there. At that group, was it mostly people that had a lot of houses? Was it mostly people that just had a few houses? Do you remember?
It was mostly people that just had a few. I mean, it certainly ranged. We, in our focus group, had everything from someone with a single family home all the way up to someone with 2,600 units was the largest in the room. But most of them, had a handful of units, 5-10 units at most. And that was, that was really the most common thing that we saw in the group.
Yeah. Well, we tell people a lot of times to join a mastermind, right? To join a mastermind or a group or get some friends that are doing the same business as you in other places that you could go through and talk to them about like what's working and what's not and come up with some plans together. And it's a great reminder that there's a group like that for everything. So even for landlords. And so if you're a new landlord and you've got your first house and maybe you're not trying to make any changes with anything right now, but you just want to learn a little bit more, join that local association and you're going to find somebody else that has one. You're going to have somebody that has 5, that has 10. If you decide, hey, I want to have 20 houses someday, the best thing you can do is go talk to several people with 20 houses. Right. You don't necessarily need to talk to the guy that has 500 houses unless you want to have 500, right? You need to figure out what you want to be and then learn from those people because those are drastically different business plans that are out there, drastically different, goals, what's there. So RentRedi is going to continue to grow. You're going to keep making changes as you go. And I love the $9 a month is pretty crazy because there's some property management software out there that is thousands a month. You have thousands of dollars a month to try it. And from what I've seen, the features are the same. There's also some property management software out there that says, hey, we're free, right? So you guys you're like, we're $9 a month. But when I started looking into the difference of some of the free ones, there were a lot of extra charges that would happen for collecting rent and things like that. So it was like the freemium model, like, hey, the software is free, but along the way, they charge you a lot of stuff as you go.
Right.
Is it $9 plus you get charged a whole bunch of stuff?
No. And I think, and that's really where the thing gets tricky with a lot of those is, they'll say they're free and nothing's really ever free. Every company has to, no matter what industry they're in, they have to make money somehow. So that's my take on anywhere is if it says it's completely free, find out why, because there has to be some money somewhere. And in a lot of cases, they're charging more to get your money faster or for, add-on features, or they don't address a lot of the features along the way. They might say, we're only going to do one piece of it. And all of a sudden you're using, 5 different systems to try to manage everything. And you still have a headache that you started out with in the first place.
So last question, you're an entrepreneur now, like now you're running a business, you own a business that wasn't what you started off to do. All of our listeners, not all of them are property managers yet. Not all of them are investors yet, but all of them are entrepreneurs. All of them kind of run their own life. They run their own business and they've got different partners and different strategies. What is 1 or 2 things you've learned as being an entrepreneur that you could give as advice to other entrepreneurs, of things that they should be focusing on, or how to grow, or attitudes to have?
Yeah, I mean, one in particular that I think is interesting is that, whatever you start out expecting it to be like, a lot of the time it will never end up that way. I mean, in my particular case, it was trying to design a tenant-only application. And all of a sudden, you fast forward and you're end to end, it's landlords, it's agents, it's their tenants, and being able to pivot and make those changes, not just in a time like COVID, but just in general, understanding that things will change throughout that time. And kind of coupled with that, and really the second piece is that almost everyone always has a client or a tenant or somebody that they're working with, or that's using their service or product. They are by far the best source of knowledge you can possibly ask for, because if you ask for it, a lot of the time they'll tell you exactly what they want and exactly the way they want it. And even if you ask them, well, how would you envision actually making this possible? They have some awesome ideas of how to make that a reality as well. And so that's one thing that I've done. It's something I will always do, is just try to, we are talking just about like getting into the chat itself and really reading through about what people are asking for and why. But I think you can apply that if you're an agent talking to different tenants, and maybe the tenant doesn't want the unit, trying to get a little bit of information about why is maybe you won't sell that particular tenant, but you'll set yourself up well for the next one you speak to. And I feel like it can be applied to anything.
Yeah, we were talking early on about how one of my favorite things to do is go read the chats at some of my software companies, see what people are asking for so we can know what to fix. I mean, all of you listeners know I listen to your reviews. I go read your reviews. I make adjustments where I see that I can make your reviews better, so people are out there listening. And I like that, the idea too, as agents, one of those things you can do. He said, like, you can go ask the questions of, even if you already sold the house for somebody, even if you already represented them in something a month or two ago, you can call them and go, hey, what did you think? How did it go? What could I have done better? What really worked out well, what didn't? Because your clients know about the process. They know what they love. They know what they didn't. And they will probably, just like you said, they will probably have some advice that says, what, I would have rather in this case, you would have done this instead of that. And it could be something really simple. I wish that after this time of night, it would have been like this. I wish the way you would have done this would have done different, but it worked out fine. Now, some of that time you have to really grind people to do it. You have to really say, like, no, I know that we got along great. And but can you think of anything, any little thing? I promise you won't hurt my feelings. Is there something that happened that you said, oh, I wish that would have happened differently? And what is it? And I think, agents, you will be amazed at what your people will tell you with that. You're used to saying, like, what kind of house do you want? Right? Like, what kind of house do you want? Answering those questions, but at the end of the day, asking them, how was my service? What kind of service do you want? How could I have changed it? What is your ideal experience? If there was a perfect experience, what would that be? And try to strive to create that relationship and that experience for them. Ryan, any final thoughts? People can go find more information about RentRedi at rentredi.com. It's RentRedi. We've got a code where if they use Rockstars, they get the whole year for $1 or something like that. So it's even, what's cheaper than, it's not free. You still have to pay $1, but that's even cheaper than your $9 a month. Any other resources out there? People had questions for you or wanted to see maybe some other videos or things out there about you to learn more about business or RentRedi?
Definitely. We have a YouTube and a blog as well. It depends on how you like consuming content. But, if you're a listener here, you probably like the YouTube's a little more. But there's also, blog or anything else. And ultimately, just going back to the chat piece of it, if you just have questions or you want to talk about anything, shoot us a message. It's honestly really nice to talk to people. So if you ever have any ideas about different things you want to share, just drop by the site and message in over the chat.
Yes. Drop by the RentRedi site, put in a chat, tell Ryan he did a great job on the podcast. If you like one of the things that he's added to his software, you can tell him that too. Or if you have any ideas, he's happy to listen. The Real Estate Rockstars, thank you guys for listening. We'll be back in just a few days with another podcast episode. But for now, that's it. Thanks for listening. Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.